Welcome to the Portal to Ascension. We're so grateful today to have Michael Cremo with us for a special interview leading up to our Indus Valley and Ancient India Civilization Conference this weekend, which Michael is also a part of. So I'll be sharing that link and telling you more about the conference as we go here. And first of all, let's introduce Michael. I'm going to read your bio, Michael. Thank you so much for being here with us today. And we're really excited to have you. Michael was born in 1948, and he conceived of the idea of forbidden archaeology, which of course is a big topic here at Portal to Ascension. We talk about it as hidden history and, you know, the true world history. And of course, archaeology is directly related to that. And Michael's on the cutting edge of science and cultural issues around these topics. And over the course of a few months' time, he may be found on a pilgrimage to sacred India sites, or maybe making an appearance on national television, lecturing at a mainstream science conference, or even speaking to an alternative science gathering, and here on Portal to Ascension as well, which we're really grateful for. He crosses disciplinary and cultural boundaries and presents to various audiences a compelling case for negotiating a new consensus on the nature of reality. This is one of my favorite topics to discuss. I can't wait to see what Michael wants to negotiate regarding reality and what he thinks reality is really like. Cremo's primary research studies concentrate on the discoveries of artifacts and other archaeological relics, showing evidence that humanity might possibly be much older than has been conventionally accepted. Think so? Yes, and much different maybe than what has been taught in science and academia. So he's co-authored a book called Forbidden Archaeology with Richard L. Thompson, and he sees a new consciousness emerging that integrates science and religion into a cohesive paradigm of reality. Michael is a member of the World Archeological Congress and the European Association of Archaeologists, as well as an associate member of the Bhaktivedanta Institute, specializing in history and philosophy of science. And if you've been hanging out with me at all, and Neil, you know that we are both very into these topics, as well as, especially for me, the spiritual aspects of ancient Vedic tradition, Mamuni Mayan, Vastu Shastra, all the ancient Vedas, the pre-Vedas, like the Pranava Veda, and so many places we could go with this conversation today, Michael. And first of all, I just want to welcome you and let you say hi and give us a little introductory remark in our interview.
Well, it's good to be with you, Jiraiya and Neil. I'm really looking forward to the conference this weekend. My contribution is going to be on the Indus Valley civilization, which is one of the most mysterious of the ancient civilizations that existed around 5,000 years ago, and going back, who knows how far really, but at least 5 to 6 or 7,000 years. You know, we had at that time the Sumerian civilization and the Egyptian civilization and Chinese civilization and the Yellow Valley, but also an Indus Valley civilization, which its cultural identity is very much up in the air because nobody has been able at this point to convincingly translate their text, which is basically a series of symbols on clay seals. So other methods have to be applied to get some clue of their cultural identity. And one of them, the one that I'm going to focus on, is one that you just mentioned, Jiraiya. Am I pronouncing the name right?
Yes, you are, Jiraiya.
Jiraiya. Okay. You mentioned Vastu, which is Vedic system of architecture and actually town design. So if I'm going to propose that if some of the sites from this Indus Valley civilization can be shown to conform to Vastu principles, that would give us some clue about their cultural identity. That's what I'm going to be talking about.
I'm getting chills I'm getting chills. That's so exciting to me.
Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to what the other speakers are going to be contributing to this. Very interesting topic.
Yes, here, let's take a look just real quick for everybody. Portal to Ascension, the Indus Valley and Ancient India 2-day online conference. It's coming up just this very weekend, Saturday and Sunday. We're going to have a wonderful time here with our presenters who are very knowledgeable. And I'm going to do actually a presentation on kumari condom, which of course is also deeply related to Vastu and Mamuni Mayan and this ancient pre-second flood back tradition of the architecture, which is fascinating. I know that you probably believe in past lives, Michael. I feel like I was definitely there. Let's just say that. So yeah, so here's, if you want to find out more about Michael's presentation, and yes, you're speaking directly about Vastu, and I've studied it a bit myself. And so portaltoascension.org/event/Ancient India Conference is what you want to look for there. Wonderful. Oh my gosh, there's so many things we could get into. I don't even know where to begin. I feel like a kid in the candy store. And so when we speak of the spiritual traditions of ancient India, you know, there are, of course, many. And one of the things that's so fascinating about India and ancient India is it seems to me that people knew that there was one God, and they knew that there were many pathways to the realization of that one God. And I don't believe that they, for the most part, at least during certain time periods, felt any conflict when someone else had a different path. They thought, oh yeah, there's another doorway, there's another pathway to God, and here's another one over here. And they all understood the core essence of the primary teaching, which is that it's all one God soap, like Dr. Bronner says, right? Like there's a pathway in, and which track on that pathway you take is up to you. Would you agree, or what is your reflection on that comment?
Well, I think you're right that there was some toleration for different ways of approaching the absolute truth. Typically, they speak of Stud Darshan, the 6 ways of approaching the absolute truth. And there's a path of meditation, a path of yoga, a path. There's even atheism and materialism. It's one way of looking at the world. And I think they had a reliance on persuasion as far as getting people to make a decision which of the paths they would prefer. I think that's fine. The problem comes when someone has some exclusive claim for truth and then tries to impose it on others by force of various kinds. So I think that's one of the big problems of our world today. However, among the different paths that make up the fabric, the tapestry of Indian spirituality, I kind of chosen the Bhakti Yoga path as the one that's most suitable for me and my psychophysical makeup. So,
I agree with that. I mean, like myself as well. And when we really look at Bhakti Yoga, there's a lot of similarities with other religions around the world, such as what one could say that, Jesus was a Bhakti yogi, for instance. Like that was the Christian tradition in the New Testament version talks about God as love and falling in love with love, basically, and being in that bliss state where we're loving the divine with all of our heart, all of our might, and all of our soul. That's another thing I find really fascinating. Not only were there traditions in ancient India that there was tolerance for, but there's also a tolerance for different entire pathways, such as the Christian or the Jewish or the the Muslim, and in other words, could we find the similarities rather than fighting over the differences in these paths?
Yeah, well, my guru used to say, gold is gold wherever you find it. So if you find love for God in a certain tradition, it doesn't matter what you call the tradition, just like a gold coin. You could stamp it with a different symbol of a different country, an American gold coin, 1 ounce gold coin, a Chinese 1 ounce gold coin. Yeah.
Mhm.
But really gold, what difference does it really make what symbol you stamp on it?
Beautiful. And do you speak about who your guru was? Is that something you share, or is that something private?
Well, it's in Indian spiritual life, it's generally something that's considered private. But if someone asks me, I'm happy to say who my guru was. If you're asking, it was Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who was a representative of the Bhakti Yoga tradition in India and brought it to the West and internationalized it somewhat. But I don't claim to have any exclusive truth that just I know something or my group knows something and nobody else knows anything. Not like that at all.
That's wonderful. Yes, Prabhupada, beautiful. Well, blessings to all the great gurus who have helped everyone along our pathways for all the centuries.
Yes.
And holding massive space for humanity right now, I'm going to imagine, as we awaken more to the truth of us, which, at the end of the day, that idea, that notion of self-realization, God realization, and the prodigal son and daughter making our way back homeward to the realization that we are already at one and atoned with the divine, with God within ourselves. And variously, we, like Hanuman says, when I know that I am at one with God, then I be that and I beam that. And when I'm in my forgetful state, then I serve God. So there's like at any given moment of any given day, we may be more awake or less awake. Would you agree?
Yes, I would agree. Fortunately, I'm a little bit awake now.
Yeah, we've rubbed the sleep out of our eyes to a certain degree.
Yeah. But I think what you're saying and what many great sages have said lead to the idea that we're really in a consciousness-based universe, whereas in our surrounding society, many people are convinced that we're in a matter-based universe, where they think that consciousness is produced by chemicals in the brain, and they don't have any conception of a conscious self that can exist apart from matter, and that it's really the truth that matter comes from consciousness rather than consciousness comes from matter. So I think a fundamental characteristic of the spiritual philosophies of the world.
Yes. And when we go back to Vastu again, so Mamuni Mayan with the Einschwärmen, I think also the Pranavaveda, and in those early works, he showed us how Om light and Om sound moved from this, like combined together to create time and space. And then the four of them created air, the five of them created water, the six of them created fire, and all of those guys together created finally earth, which ends up in the southwest corner of a Vastu home, for instance, when you're trying to create a container based on how consciousness moves into form. And that's getting a little deep, but it's like, to me, that's the profound stuff and the profound knowing, and the realization that everything that we create in the physical first had an etheric and pre-physical energetic of light and sound, and then the imprint of thought upon it to create a certain type of structure or form or experience,
which can encourage the realization of all those things that you talked about in the individual who is inhabiting that space.
Correct. Yes.
In
And
other
that's
words, it
why.
can
Go ahead.
put you in that meditative state where you gradually realize these things.
Exactly. And that's so that all of the ancient temples, the homes, even the cities, and the plans of how whole cities were designed were based on those very codes, and the 64 Pada Devatas, which encircle the Vastu Purusha. They are the map of that, so that a city and a home and a building and a temple would literally lift you up. So, for example, Ramana Maharshi went and sat in Arunachala in the temple for many years because he knew that he could achieve that higher state by being in that vibration. And I believe, many of the gurus and yogis and, have done that very same thing, the pilgrimages to the temples to elevate their consciousness and prepare for the full Dharma.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, the very structure of the temple is based on that ascension, the raising of consciousness. Yeah, the Vastu Purusha Mandala, it is used in architecture in a horizontal way. Yeah, the Vastu Purusha is in a kind of a yoga posture in that setting. Then the same Vastu Purusha can be used vertically, as it is in the temples, to structure the vertical elevations of it, so that it's like you're going up through the chakras. So
that's new for me. I love knowing that. Thank you.
Yeah, that's anyways, we'll talk more about these things during the conference.
And then just to throw in there, while we're talking a little bit about Vastu, that those same codes informed not only architecture, but also music, poetry, and dance as well, and sculpture. So in other words, there was a foundational code behind the creation of all these things, which held the construct of these higher vibrations for the purpose of elevation of consciousness.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. Yeah, it's I don't know how deeply we try to get into Vastu and the Vastu Purusha and the whole story of behind that. That's at least according to some accounts, the Vastu Purusha was originally causing disturbances and then was brought under control of the different devas that took positions, and as you say, among those different squares of the Vastu Mandala. So
that he was a little unruly. Yes, I did. I read that story recently. He was out there causing havoc in the universe, and everybody was like, wait, we've got to give you some kind of container here.
Yeah, to stabilize the earth and all the different elements that are used when we try to make some structure, or as you said, some dance, or because you're dancing on a platform.
Yes.
So I can understand it. That was a bit new for me, that that's also applied for dance and other phenomena, the same Vastu principle.
And even like, so the finger positions, like I'm probably not doing things correctly, but the certain positions that were held were literally based on, the fact that there's mathematical proportion in our hands and our body. And so all of that would be blended together in a way that conformed to and demonstrated the beauty of these principles. And the Carnatic music, the classical Carnatic music, would be also based on that. I absolutely love listening to the classical Carnatic. And they say, if you play classical Carnatic music, my guru, Jesse, the teacher for Vastu, Jessie Mercé, told me that, yes, she shared a lot with us about these things, and she's at Om Science. So
amazing.
Yeah. Homescience.com. So yeah, so the Carnatic music, when you play it in your home, it'll uplift the space just by itself. Like just by playing the music, you're not going to change a home built, like we build homes today, into a Vastu home, but you can add the Vastu energy by bringing that music in.
Yeah. So there are a lot of these different Vedic arts and sciences that I think are resources for people who are interested in these things. But my topic at the conference is going to be related specifically to the Indus Valley civilization. But another topic that I often speak about is the antiquity of the human species. Because according to the Vedic teaching, humans have been around right since the beginning, because the universe has a purpose. It's to allow conscious selves to understand that they are beings of pure consciousness, not just meat machines or machines made of molecules, competition with each other for survival. We're all part of that family of beings of pure consciousness. And that's best understood in the human form of life. So I think the human bodily vehicle has always been available for conscious selves. It's like if we were going to put a space station up into the sky. Why do we do it? Well, because there's astronauts that are going to need it.
Yeah, we want to be able, it's like our wetsuit, so that consciousness, and if you want to call it souls or the divine, the we that we are before form, can come into and experience this reality that we call 3D and earth and form.
Yeah.
Which means, points to the fact that we're not the body, which of course, when you get into Raja Yoga and some of the other traditions and techniques, we're learning to remember what is not I, to come out of suffering, to relieve ourselves from various types of suffering that come from identification with the body and identification with the material world and identification and attachment to people, places, and things that cause us to feel lack and a loss and separation, rather than realizing that this 3D arena is somewhat illusory, which we call Maya, of course. Maybe that points to what you're speaking about around the new conception of reality.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Unless one is aware of these things, one is going to not be in the best position to understand what's in one's own best self-interest and what's in the best interest of others as well. If we don't know who we are or who others are, it means we're going to be acting on some false platform, some mistaken concept, and of course that's going to create difficulties for ourselves and for others.
Mm-hmm.
And so the sages of ancient India sort of understood that this is the essential thing that people have to be aware of. And long ago, they could kind of foresee some of the difficulties that we would get into by pursuing this other path of just trying to get more and more absorbed in the 3D world that you mentioned. So they gave various systems of self-realization, meditation, yoga, which you can also extend to prayer, contemplation, other disciplines that other traditions have followed as well. I mean, there's a very extensive tradition of Christian mysticism, where Saint John of the Cross and others got into meditating about their relationship with God. You can find this in a lot of the different wisdom traditions. So it's something I think that we need to be reminded of in today's world.
Absolutely agree with you on that, and it's beautifully said. Where a worldly thing is not wrong, but when we forget the divine and we forget who we are, we forget the source within, then we can get all caught up in it, really think it's real, and that could be what we call the fall. The fall could be a fallen consciousness from the awareness of what we're speaking of, this higher spiritual essence that's our true identity. And we've basically fallen into a case of mistaken identity where we identify with the form rather than the consciousness inside the form. And then that tangles us up in all kinds of knots. And it's the stuff of movies and drama and great novels of, tragedy and comedy and everything else that we've had to experience here, believing that we're separate from the Godhead and we're, that we have to fight over resources or mates or all these things, which are so far from the truth of us. But hey, it's made for a good play, right? So Brahma's embodied here to experience everything, they say. And certainly we've experienced, gosh, just knows just about everything at this point, I would think, as human beings.
Yeah, we're now this may get down to some fundamental difference among different spiritual paths of understanding in the Vedic context. But the path that I follow would say, yeah, we're looking for something in all these relationships and activities that we're performing in this theater or movie or novel of material existence. And it may be, in a sense, illusion, but the illusion points to, I would say, a reality. Say, like if you have a reflection of a tree, a mango tree in the water. Well, if you go for the mango fruit that's reflected in the water, you get a handful of water. And you could say, well, it's illusion. But the illusion points to a reality that there's a tree a real tree with the real mango fruit on it. If you go for that, then you've got the real fruit. So I would say in this world, we're pursuing reflections of eternal realities that exist on some higher level. Like you say, it's interesting. There are all kinds of interesting things we experience here, but they're kind of mixed with temporality. In other words, things are temporary, and they're mixed with all kinds of stuff we would rather not have as part of it, whether it's, economic crisis or war or natural disasters, or just the fact that our own bodies are the vehicles that we're attempting to use are temporary. But there is a level on which these things can all be experienced in a way that isn't mixed with the unpleasant things that are encountered on this level of reality. I would propose.
That's a beautiful, yes, I love that. So in other words, yes, we can be in the world and not of it, and we can enjoy the world, and we can learn how to manage our consciousness, because everything's coming from consciousness, such that our experience of this reality becomes more and more benevolent and uplifted and good and positive. Is that what you mean?
Yes, that's one effect of it, but it also means being able to raise consciousness to the point where it's situated in its permanent state, not having to operate through temporary vehicles, but by its own spiritual senses and spiritual form, which are eternal. So that's so both things are there. If one is on that platform of consciousness, then one will be, like, as you said, in but not of. But you can also be out of this level of reality and just existing as the being of pure consciousness.
So now we're getting into the notion of, for instance, one thing you might be pointing to here is the different locus. So this reality is one loca or location, one place, one platform of experience. And there's other ones. And this one is sort of some people call it a replica or a copy or a simulation. There's lots of different things people call it here. And it's one where we keep looping back in, and we've been programmed. The bodies are programmed to be short-lived, and we get all that karma accumulated, all those samskaras and all that residue, and we loop back in and we get stuck on the wheel. But we can actually start going up, and we could go up to the other locas, where some of the locas is where you hang out the whole lifetime in the beautiful garden with Agastya and Babaji and all the sages. You get to be with the masters, and then you can go up to the higher and higher logos, and then there's Satya Yoga and Brahma Loka. But what I've heard said is, even if you achieve these other lokas, after certain numbers of ages, whatever that is, millions of years, thousands of years, eventually you're going to fall back into the cycles of incarnation in the lower realms, unless you do the ultimate liberation of realizing your total oneness with the Godhead, which takes you beyond this certain level of locus into the absolute, basically. And then the absolute, you can incarnate, I guess, but you've achieved something beyond this strata of possibility. Does that make sense or resonate with
what you're saying? Is just music to my ears, because I'm involved in a project in India It's called the Temple of the Vedic Planetarium, which is being constructed in Mayapur, West Bengal. And this project is meant to demonstrate exactly what you're saying. It's a temple, in other words, it's a spiritual place, but like many temples in India or in other places like Angkor Wat, it's the structure of the Vedic cosmos is going to be built into it. And it will be meant to demonstrate what you just spoke of, these different lokas. Loka is a Sanskrit word. You could say it's related to our word location in the sense that we have to exist somewhere. We have to exist in a certain neighborhood or planet or level of the universe, which is what those lokas are that you described. You described it very beautifully, but we're going to try to, using all of the facilities of modern graphics and technology, to make this into a very positive experience for people, a very positive learning experience, where they become acquainted with what you were just talking about. You summarized it very, very, very well.
That's thrilling to me. I'm all excited. I'm like, wow, I'm going to be wanting to communicate with you more about that project because that is so thrilling to me, actually. I'm really
I'm really thrilled to be involved with it. So
it's like a time-space coordinate, right? So a loka is a time-space coordinate. So if we're talking about time travel or being able to blip from one universe to the next, one place to the next, or even if you're getting in your car, you put on your GPS, you're moving from one time-space coordinate to another time-space coordinate. And so, there's larger platform, like there's the Earth, which has many time-space coordinates in it. And then there's other planets or other lokas, which have multiplicitous time-space coordinates within them, but then you could also bump, from one entire construct to another as well.
That's what we're going to be attempting to communicate to people in our planetarium exhibits and museum exhibits that are going to be part of this of Vedic planetarium project.
Cool is that? And so once again, I think you're going to talk a little bit more about that this weekend at the conference, or
it may come up. I mean, definitely the discussion of Vastu and the Indus Valley civilization sites will be there, but depending upon how much time there is, I may mention that other project as well.
Absolutely. Yes, we have some other wonderful people. Nilesh is going to talk about the Mahabharata Ramayana evidence and timeline, and Neil is going to be talking about Hampi as well as origins of migration theories around Indus Valley. I'm going to be talking about Kumari Condom, which is Kumari continent, which is around Sri Lanka, and what some people call Lemuria, exploring that. Bibu is going to be talking about yoga mudras in Orthodox Christian art, which to me that is so cool and fascinating, and I've been aware of that for a long time. The bridges between these traditions, and does it indicate a Hindu-Buddhist influence? I would say yes, and can't wait to see what he does. And then Laura Croyd is going to talk about Ayurveda, the ancient science of self-discovery. So we're in for a real treat this weekend. If you go to portaltoascension.org and look on the online events, you'll be able to find that link and join us there.
Yeah, that's going to be fantastic. I've been to Hampi.
Have you? Okay.
Which is a pretty amazing place. Like it said in the notes there on the poster, it's the appearance place of Hanuman. So there was a hill there. There's a cave on the top of it where he is said to have appeared. So it's an
Amazing.
amazing place. I'm going to try to tune into that part of it. And your topic's really amazing too, kumari condom. The idea that in past ages there were, the subcontinent of India extended far to the south into areas that are now under ocean water, deep ocean water. So I think that's very amazing. And then you have the different sangams that took place at different times in parts of that region that are now no longer visible to us. So I'd be interested to hear about that as well.
Right, for sure. And like you said, humanity may be way older than we think, and has been here in all these different cycles, which is part of why India is so fascinating, because there's just such an absolute richness of leftovers from remnants from those other times, which give us a sense of like a very advanced civilization, like as opposed to, oh yeah, they did it with, it's like just a notion that primitive man built these things. It's like, what are you guys on? Like, honestly, if you even look at something like the Ellora caves and, think that primitive man did that. Isn't that a funny thing that we're facing here in the thinking these days?
Yeah, that Kailash temple, especially at Ellora, is amazing. I went there a few years ago, and I was just blown away. I mean, basically, what they've got there is this huge stone mountain. Then, in past centuries, or even longer ago, people actually carved out vast temples with pillars and windows and elaborate rooms. I just couldn't figure out how they did it.
Right. It's like, was this like somebody came down on a spaceship and just sort of 3D printed it into the side of the mountain or something? Or like,
yeah, 3D
printed. It's absolutely astounding.
Yeah, I think they had access to technologies that we haven't stumbled upon yet.
Yeah, and at the same time, when I in my studies of Vastu with Dr. Jessie, she showed us that there were unbelievably skilled sculptors who did do things by hand too. So it's not like it was all just machine work or something. I bet it does seem like there perhaps were a lot of machines going that, from the different things that you can see, the tools that you can see in some of the sculptures, like people like Praveen Mohan talk about sometimes on his YouTube channel. But there's also the knowledge, the literal knowledge of the Vastu tradition of sculptors who have an unbelievable amount of skill in literally doing things by hand. So it's still a bit of a mystery to us, I think, how all these things were accomplished. What have you found around archaeology with, like, what in your experience of archaeology, looking at these temples and how they were made? Do you have has that given any insight? I mean, that's probably a 3-day answer there, but I'll just.
Yeah, I mean, like you were mentioning that these things are remnants from previous ages. Like if you take the Sri Rangam temple in South India in the Tamil Nadu state, it's a temple dedicated to the god Vishnu. And it's really kind of amazing. You've got the central temple area, and then it's surrounded by a wall, and it's surrounded by another wall, and 7 walls all together. And it's stated that a pilgrim or visitor to the temple who's going through the different walls to get to the central temple, which houses the deity or Murti of Vishnu. It's like you're going through the different lokas, rising up through the different chakras. It's kind of like a symbolic journey as you enter, and then you come to the central temple, and there's an image carved in looks like black stone of Vishnu lying on the causal ocean, getting ready to manifest the material universes. In that sense, we're like a dream of Mahavishnu. But if you look at the temple history, they explain that this form was originally made and worshipped by Brahma on Brahma Loka. You were talking about the different lokas. And then it was passed on to Vivasvan, who is considered the demigod in charge of the sun. And then, like many royal lineages in India, they consider they have a lineage of kings, queens coming from the solar dynasty and some from a lunar dynasty. But one of the first kings in the solar dynasty on Earth, his name was Ikshvaku. He received this form and built a temple for it millions of years ago. And then over time, the temple was lost, covered by jungle, sand, it was completely lost. And a few thousand years ago, it's stated in the temple histories that a king was going through this jungle and he fell asleep and he had a dream. And in the dream, it was revealed to him that the form of this Mahavishnu deity was buried in a certain place. So he went to that place, excavated it, constructed the beginnings of the current temple. So, you could just visit the place and it's fantastic. But if you know the history of it, it's really pretty amazing.
That's the Sri Rangam, you said?
Yeah, it's called Sri Rangam.
Okay.
It's in South India. I think it's the biggest Vishnu temple in India.
Wow.
And as I said, the temple is considered to be a model of the universe, of the cosmos. And it's pretty amazing to go there.
I can only imagine. I'm going to have to look that up after this, and maybe it sounds like it's probably part of what we would have called kumari condom, that time frame back there. So I will definitely look that up and maybe bring a picture of it into the talk.
Well, connected with kumari condom, I think there's Madurai, South India, which is a place where one of the sangams, I think the last sangam, took place. Sangam means assembly of sages. So the story of Kumari Kandam is told in what's called the Sangam literature. So the early sangams or gatherings of sages were held in parts of Kumari Kandam that are no longer visible. Yeah, a long time ago, they would have held it in another city, part of the South. But that city no longer exists. It's underwater. And then there was another Sangam in another city, now vanished. And then finally there was a Sangam at Madurai, which is still visible.
Hmm.
And it's a city you can go to.
Amazing. Well, Michael, we've come to the end of our time today. Sorry, did you want to say one last thing there on that?
Well, we're all going to eventually come to the end of our time.
That is true. That's part of the spiritual growth, right? But what I can say, one of my main takeaways from this conversation today is I would love more conversations with you. So maybe at some point we could do this again if you would like to. And
sure.
I feel like we're just, there's so much wisdom and knowledge that you've accumulated and that you've experienced directly and, on many levels. And it's just such a joy and honor and a pleasure to speak with you about these things. So thank you so much for being with us here today and for joining us at the conference this weekend, which I'll just share one more time here for people. It's this very weekend. It's going to be Saturday and Sunday. And you can go to portaltoascension.org/event/ancient-india-conference, or simply go to online events and find it there. And yes, once again, Michael, what is your website where people can find out more about what you're doing?
People can come to my website, mcremo.com, mcremo.com. There's a schedule link where they'll find upcoming talks, like the conference this weekend, for example. And there's also an opportunity to see my books and purchase them if they want.
Perfect.
So that's a good place for people to start. mcremo.com, mcremo.com. I'm also on Facebook. I have a public figure page there. And so.
Wonderful. And once again, thank you so much. We're wrapping up for today, and we can't wait to be with you again this weekend and hopefully have some more interviews in the future as it's appropriate timing wise for you.
Okay. It's a pleasure and honor for me to have this opportunity to have this conversation with you today, and look forward to this weekend.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Much love, everyone. We'll see you again soon.